Welcome in to another new podcast from the Coatings Pro interview series. As always, I'm your host, Ben Dubose, news editor with the AMP Publications team. Today, I'm joined by Job Kunin, Sustainability Program Manager at AkzoNobel, a global sustainability leader in the paints and coatings industry. Job, thanks so much for taking the time. How are you?
Very well. Thanks very much, Ben, for inviting me. Doing well. I'm actually here today at the U.S. Green Build Conference in Washington, D.C., participating in one of the sessions as such as a speaker. And great to see all the dynamics, right, and activity which is happening here.
Give us a little bit of background. I know you're on the sidelines as we're recording this in the final week of September. So, Green Build International Conference and Expo, what does that bring together as far as the industry, and what is AkzoNobel's place in that?
First of all, here at this event, the U.S. Green Building Council is celebrating their 30th anniversary. I think, we can be really proud of the US GBC having developed LEED, right, as one of the leading green building certifications. And of course, during a show like this, during a conference like this, a lot of experts from the industry come together and discuss, of course, how do you make the green building environment more represented, right? How do you develop more of these green buildings, of course, not only in the US, but also in other countries and regions in the world. There's a lot of knowledge sharing, so a lot of educational sessions happening here for all kinds of different stakeholders in the built environment, trying to learn more about the green buildings, and of course making sure that more green buildings can be developed. The role of AkzoNobel in this market is very clear. We make paints and coatings for the built environment. Particularly in North America, we have some substantial operations, and we work, of course, with particularly our customers, specifiers, but also applicators who use our coatings, right, to either protect or beautify buildings as such. And we have a wide variety of solutions for the green built environment. So actually, as part of our programs on sustainability, we try to develop our more sustainable solutions, make our products, our solutions more sustainable, not only just from a product portfolio point of view, but also on what they do for actually our customers, and in the end, of course, for the buildings on which are being applied. So a few key targets there are, of course, the carbon footprint reduction, but also circular use of raw materials.
Let's talk a little bit about your personal background. You're currently the sustainability program manager, among other tasks. Just walk us through, I guess, your career trajectory, what got you to where you are today with the company. Did you always know that this was going to be sort of your target area of emphasis, your niche? Just walk us through how sustainability became such an important driver, not just for the company, but for you personally.
Yeah, actually, when I started my career in more logistics management, trying to optimize networks, flows, the footprint of companies. I did that actually starting for AkzoNobel. And then I passed my career in different functions, almost all kinds of key functions in our company, in AkzoNobel. I worked in supply chain, logistics, production, marketing, sales. And there's always been kind of one team in there, which is, of course, sustainability. You will see today the past few years, the sustainability in society has gotten a lot more attention. But working for AkzoNobel, we have been working on sustainability already for many years. And what I really like in my role today is more the business development aspect. So how do we actually create value from sustainability? Because sustainability used to be a target where you say, well, maybe we can reduce the impact on the environment. A long time that has been, of course, on top of our mindset. But of course, in society, there's much more demand for sustainable solutions, but particularly in the built environment where you have a very fragmented group of stakeholders and decision makers. It's really tough, a challenge, right, to get the whole market moving. And that is, I think, a really exciting challenge for myself and also for us as a company to make that happen.
I'm sure one of the themes you hear at Green Build and honestly throughout the industry is this whole notion of a circular economy. Could you explain a little bit about what that is and how a paints and coatings company such as AkzoNobel can potentially achieve that? Just talk about the role of a circular economy as it pertains to broader sustainability initiatives.
Yeah, circularity in the built environment, particularly right where a lot of resources are being used to actually construct these buildings or even renovate buildings. We know we need currently a lot of resources for that. The built environment in certain countries and regions in the world is maybe responsible for up to 50% of raw material resources. As such, if you think about carbon footprint, we're talking around about 40% of the overall carbon footprint that we humans have actually comes from the built environment. Now, circularity is getting more attention because people realize we can't go on like this, and we have to actually start reusing more of the materials we actually already have available. So you will see in different countries, regions in the world that when buildings are being demolished, we want to try and reuse some of those materials. Being based in the Netherlands, I see that happening where the built environment, the building sector itself is trying to reuse more and more materials to reduce actually the need and demand on virgin raw materials. When I look at across all the different market segments to which AkzoNobel provides paints and coatings, we see that a key driver for circularity is actually the carbon footprint reduction. And also in paints and coatings, around about 11-12% of the carbon footprint in our paints and coatings globally, on average, comes from end of life. So the carbon which sits in those paints and coatings that are ending up at their end of life, and that is where you can of course use more renewable or recycled raw materials. So we as AkzoNobel, we have different programs in place to actually increase the amount of recycled or renewable raw materials in our paints and coatings. But actually, the real historical reason why people actually use coatings, right, is actually to protect a substrate. And that is also something we should not forget. Protecting building materials, if we talk about the built environment, is very important because you will actually need you need to use fewer new building materials in the future if you want to maintain that built environment. And that's something often we might not think about. We also have a role to play in that. We have to kind of educate and help our customers decide and choose those more sustainable and longer lasting solutions to actually make sure that whatever has been coated remains alive and in good shape over time.
Let me ask a quick follow-up to that. You mentioned that people realize we can't go on like this. How much of that is industry driven and how much of that is policy driven at a government level? Because I'm sure, underneath it all, it has to be a little bit of both. But when we're talking about policy, that can vary significantly from one geography to the next, from one country to the next, as opposed to if it's at an industry level, then you might have more of a general sort of standardization because obviously a company such as AkzoNobel operates in a lot of different markets around the globe. And so if you take the lead at an industry level, you're more likely to have, not that it's going to be identical from one country, one region to the next, but more, I guess, more consistency to it. So when we talk about people realizing that changes need to be made moving forward, how much of it is at the policy level and how much of it is you guys and the people you're talking about at Greenbuild realizing as an industry that this is what we need to do?
Good question, Ben. I think you have both things. Both topics are actually very valid and important. We see particularly drive on, let's say, more demand for the use of renewable raw materials coming actually from consumers. You and me, we buy all kinds of consumer goods, whether that's a beauty product or maybe a household product. We as consumers we realize that we can't go on like this. So we do put a value on that, and that manufacturers of those products actually start using more renewable raw materials. They recycle more. You see that happening a lot in packaging materials, more and more so in actually the products itself. Governments are also trying to develop policies in that area.
Yes.
If we look at the built environment, a lot, of course, historically has been focused on reducing carbon footprint and trying to reduce the energy usage in buildings. So what we call the operational carbon. But more and more you will see now attention being given also on the embodied carbon in buildings. And that's where, of course, also circularity will play a role.
Sure.
If you ask me what is the role of governance in here, I think governments are creating policies, right, to stimulate or even oblige the private sector to use more renewable raw materials. What would be great is, of course, that also for any public buildings, any public activities, and particularly, of course, public buildings, as we are talking about the built environment, that is where the government can really play a role. If they can, in their specifications and requirements also include, for instance, a minimum level of renewable content in the building materials for those buildings. It can be the educational sector, right? Other kinds of government buildings. That will really give a great push, because if that starts, then of course a large part of the sector will move, because companies, construction companies, but also other stakeholders in the value chain will see that demand growing from the public sector.
Yep.
And I think maybe the government underestimates the power and the opportunity that they have to play there as a role.
So let's talk about the technologies that can play a role in this transition. What sustainability solutions are out there to help address the challenge of producing more green buildings? I'm sure that's what you're talking about this week in Washington, D.C. at Greenbuild. Just talk, if you could, about the technology side of things and some of the sustainable solutions that are out there as we head towards 2024.
Yeah, green buildings, as we call them, they focus on a few different key areas. You can maybe group them under three headers: climate change, so carbon footprint reduction, then circularity, circular economy. How do you use less fossil raw materials? And thirdly, of course, health and well-being. So how do you contribute to the well-being of people living and working in buildings? And in all of those three groups, we have technologies, right, that can help people living, working in these kind of buildings and achieving some of those targets that have been set for the built environment. I can elaborate a little bit, of course, on that. Particularly for carbon footprint reduction, we as AkzoNobel, we have set now a few years ago, as a first paints and coatings company, we've set a target and got it approved by SBTi of reducing our carbon footprint by 50% by the year 2030, not only for our scope 1 and 2, so our own operation, but actually in our whole value chain, so upstream and downstream. And if you talk about new technologies, that's where we are reaching out to our suppliers, asking them to develop actually raw materials that have a lower carbon footprint, so where our suppliers are reducing their scope 1 and 2 emissions, but also, of course, downstream. So where we need to work with our customers, because in those technologies, in those solutions, we have products that might need less energy for curing, for instance.
Mhm.
In particular, market segments, some of our customer groups are using relatively a lot energy to cure coatings. So there we can play a role and help our customers move towards lower baking or even ambient curing type of technologies. That is on the climate change side, of course. On the circular topic, that circular raw material usage, there you can think of becoming much more efficient. So here we can help customers with new technologies, maybe not just with products, but also with service and tools, right, to reduce material use. We can include also more raw materials, but think also, of course, about reducing waste. And one of the particular technologies I would like to also address here is powder coatings. Historically, a lot of building materials have been coated with liquid coatings. Now, we also develop and sell liquid coatings. We have also sustainability programs in place to also make those kind of coatings more sustainable. But we particularly also are in favor of developing more the application of powder coatings, which do not have VOCs, so there are no solvents being used in powder coatings. And secondly, the efficiency, particularly the material efficiency, is very high of powder coatings, a lot higher than for liquid coatings. So we also try to help some of our customer groups moving from liquid to powder coatings. And maybe the third group, which I mentioned, health and well-being, that is, of course, where we focus in on making sure that we develop our products, right, with the chemical substances that are accepted by society. And secondly, how can we, of course, bring sustainability benefits or health and well-being benefits to customers who actually live and work in buildings. And here you can think of indoor air quality. You can imagine if you work all day in a building, you want to make sure that the indoor air quality is good. So then there we have different technologies of coatings that might emit maybe less solvents or other chemical substances.
I'm sure you've got plenty of examples and case studies when it comes to powder coatings, liquid coatings. In terms of the transition and trying to get people to buy in more on the low VOC side, you talked about that being a driver for powder coatings. What are some of the common questions that you get? Are people on board with that transition? Are there things they want to learn? Just walk us through, if you could, what that transition looks like and how many clients are open to, making those changes with the goal of sustainability in mind.
Yeah, that is definitely a challenge. You think about yeah, who are the kind of companies who are applying these liquid coatings. They have, of course, equipment, manufacturing equipment in place where they have
Hmm.
particular processes in place. So
Right.
we need to really be a partner of those companies to help them transfer from that kind of technology to a powder coating. And when we say partner, meaning being able to help them with data. So how can
Yes.
you actually do that? What are the implications of doing that? Also, the technical know-how. So how can you make sure that someone who applies coatings is reassured that the quality of the end product will be also very good when
Hmm.
using a powder coating. So that is a role that we have to play. Um, it will take time for sure. Customers of Axobel will need to invest money. So there's a capex involved. Of course, today with high interest rates, we're not going the right way. That is not, of course, in favor of this kind of movement. But this is where we need to keep on not only talking to our customers who apply our products, but also talk to specifiers
Sure.
and help them also maybe choose for certain technologies. And particularly for the powder coating applicators and that kind of market, we are also developing tools that hopefully will make sure that our powder coating customers also promote
Mm.
more the use of powder coatings. So we've launched, for instance, recently a tool by which powder coating customers can measure their energy that they're using and actually create clarity on that, and thereby decide or give them kind of the tool set to reduce the energy uses and therefore also the carbon footprint of their operations. Now, that is, I think, where we as Axobel can play a role, not just providing just the product, but also certain tools and services, right, to help our customers make decisions and achieve their own sustainability targets.
So at a company level, what are some of those targets moving forward? We're almost to 2024. I know in terms of this transition, AkzoNobel's got its science-based targets for 2030. What are you hoping to do as far as the timeline, the timetable moving forward? What are some realistic goals at a company level and perhaps at an industry level as well that we can achieve over the next few years?
Yeah, that is a indeed a topic. How far ahead can you look into the future, and what do we expect that will happen? We have, of course, a visibility on, let's say, the next 3 to 5 years. Yeah,
Hmm.
we know what's in our innovation pipeline. We know what kind of adaptability there is in the market. Looking all the way up to 2030 or even further is a bit of a black box. Yeah, we know what we can do in the coming years, but there will be a piece of innovation which will happen in the latter part, in that second half or that second half of the decade up towards 2030. And that is where our projections for instance, on carbon footprint reduction in our value chain, we see that more like kind of a hockey stick movement. So where we believe that a big part of the carbon footprint reduction itself will come in the second half of this decade. And so we're discussing, of course, with our suppliers. We're having lots of programs trying to help them reduce carbon footprint, but also for them to reach out to their suppliers. Actually, a part of our upstream carbon footprint sits not just with our suppliers, but actually also with the suppliers of our suppliers. So we need to help our suppliers to do the same thing as what we're doing.
Hmm.
And on the customer side, that is again also an area where, as I mentioned before, investments need to be made. Technology switches need to be made. For some of those technology changes, we have short to middle term solutions, which we know will work. But for some of them, we need some more important changes in, for instance, application and curing processes of customers, and that will take time. So if you ask me, what do you think will happen and what are realistic goals? We've set a goal of 50% by 2030. Now, that is a very ambitious goal. We probably can achieve at least half of that, or I say probably because, again, that is a black box. But what we also know is that we can't do this by ourselves. We really rely, of course, and on our suppliers and on our customers to make this happen. And that is where we have to put in a lot of effort. But that has also been where a bit of the uncertainty is. If tomorrow there are external variables which make maybe again interest rates go even further higher, which will reduce maybe certain investments that companies can make right in their production processes. as an example, then maybe we will not achieve those targets so fast. So yes, there is a certain variability there. But having said that, if you have a light on the horizon and you can work towards that is what we try to do, and that is where we try, of course, to collaborate with our suppliers and our customers to start a journey and at least to go in the right direction.
So beyond what you do with AkzoNobel, you're also a strategic global advisory member with the World Green Building Council, correct?
Yes.
So discuss and shed a little bit of light on why it's important to look at this push, not just in terms of what an executive such as yourself can do at a company level, but also to work with other organizations and with other companies in the industry, which I know is a big part of what Coming Together for Green Build this week in Washington, D.C. is about. Just walk us through the process of not just what you all work on as a company, but the importance of working collaboratively with other companies and other organizations in the industry so that everyone is pushing in the same direction.
Yeah, that is of course very important. Whether that's us, AkzoNobel, or some of our peers or other players in the industry, in the built environment, we can only do our own thing. And we cannot, let's say, see across the borders of our own company. So in our value chain, we know there are maybe specific targets that other companies in the value chain have, other stakeholders. And what does a World Green Building Council do? Well, they of course try to oversee that whole value chain, making sure that everyone goes in the same direction. Now, the World Green Building Council is actually a global organization. They give advice and direction, of course, and support to the more than 75 local green building councils in the world, like the US Green Building Council itself, of course. They try to exchange information, best practices between those councils, to really make sure that in most of these countries, right, we can make significant steps in making the built environment greener or more sustainable. What we can do as AkzoNobel, we are a global company. We are active in many different market segments, and particularly in almost all building materials that need a protection, a coating layer as such. So that is where we can, of course, bring advice to the World Green Building Council. But you can also see this World Green Building Council as a sharing platform, right, where we can understand what are the insights, the latest insight, the latest developments on our planet regarding the built environment, and how can we help particularly the local players steer what's happening in those local markets in the right direction. The built environment is very fragmented and local market, if you think about it. There are a lot of local players, even in the US. You have the federal government, but you have also, right, the states who have their own maybe policies. The built environment is in the end, a local market, very fragmented, and it's really up to organizations like the World Green Building Council to bring that together, to try and find a harmonized way moving forward, and also again putting that dot on the horizon on where we want to go.
So, two-part question as we wind down. First off, is there any message you want to convey that you have not already, as far as AkzoNobel's push, as far as things that are being discussed in Green Build, the mission that we're trying to push forward as it pertains to sustainability? And then the second part of that, for any viewer or listener that wants more information, what's the best way that they can learn more about this? I'm guessing it's as simple as just going to a website, but just use this platform to, I guess, put any last words out there, and then secondly, direct our listeners where they can learn more.
Yeah, of course, there's a possibility, right, to get either in contact with AkzoNobel. We have our website. We have a particular website on green buildings, particularly. You can also reach out to your local Green Building Council. They have lots of knowledge, best practices, insight, networking opportunities, right? Events where you can learn more. But maybe a key closing message, right, for the people who are listening to this broadcast is also think about how can you make the built environment more sustainable. And what I see both in my own company, but also outside, is when you talk about sustainability and making also the built environment more sustainable, you'll be surprised how many people actually want to make that happen. And I've seen a lot of industry players in the past few years saying, not for tomorrow, not for me, my customer is not asking for it, etc. But actually, a lot of things are happening. Actually, the need for more sustainable buildings, but also in other markets, is actually exponentially growing. And I would like to really pass that message on to everyone who's listening to this just go and talk about sustainability to your stakeholders, to your customers in particular, right? Because that's where demand will come from,
Sure.
but also probably other stakeholders you work with, and try and develop it more. And if you need, of course, support on sustainability, green buildings, then there's a few places where you can reach out to learn more about that.
That's great perspective from Job Koonin, Sustainability Program Manager at AkzoNobel. Job, thanks so much for the time.
Thank you, Ben.
All right, and this is where we will wrap things for today. For Job Koonin, I'm Ben Dubose. If you want more information from us at Coatings Pro, you can go to coatingspromag.com, or from AMP, the Association for Materials Protection and Performance, you can simply go to amp.org, ampp.org. With those plugs complete, we'll adjourn. Thanks as always for listening, and please come back soon for another new episode.